So I bet you're dying to know what happened to me, so I'm going to tell you. So NIS2 is all about resilience. And resilience is all about knowing something or experiencing something, learning from it not defeating you, and you doing something to improve then next time round. So to go through my story, I have quite reliable but old infrastructure. I had an incident alert last week. I didn't know if it was a malicious actor because it felt like someone hit me with a hurl on the back of the leg. So I called in or initiated my incident response. Doctor says, it's bad, but it's not that bad. And I'm going to give you a business continuity plan so that you can keep doing your stuff. And basically that's the lesson learned, that things are going to happen. But what we need to do is see how we can learn from it. So I suppose the idea with the slide deck is we all kind of know what the environment is like. The guys who've spoken before, they're quite energetic. I'm conscious I'm the only one who wore a tie and a jacket, so that kind of tells you where the conversation is going to go. What drew me to IT was innovation, but then we've got now regulation. So it's kind of like, that's expression of, move fast and break things. And then the Father Ted quote of, down with that sort of thing. We have to kind of put a rule on it. So when we look at the kind of environment we're dealing with, I suppose Europe's idea of this is it's kind of defined organizations now in modernity, our digital world, that there are essential services that we need to keep modern society functioning. And those essential services that support those important entities that support those essential services. So one of the comments made earlier on in the presentations was about how cyber incidents affect ordinary people. So one of the things, say for example, I know last year at the conference, my boss talked about how the HSE affected people. So you had folks who were going to hospital, they were in the middle of their kind of cancer treatment on a number of sessions of various chemotherapy or radiation treatment, arrived at the hospital. We can't give you your treatment because we don't know how much you've got before, because we have no system to tell us. Or you think of your own life, getting up in the morning, whether it's putting the kettle on, you check is the train or the bus going to run on time, you get to work, we rely on all these digital systems all the time to help us nowadays. It's the only way the modern world can run. So what's happened in the world of Europe? Well, the idea is, we've got a problem, we can pass a law to fix that, which is very noble, but probably also very naive to think that a law is going to fix it. So it started off, let's look at our critical infrastructure. What can we do to make that come more under the spotlight? So we had the NIS Directive, or the NIS1 Directive, which was in 2016. We then talked, how can we kind of certify the systems that we're using so that we're using quality products rather than just things that are not so good. So we've got the Cybersecurity Act came along. Then we have skills, research and industry. How can we build an environment that will support that? So we have regulations around that have come on board. Then we have the wider economy. We're talking about NIS2. We're talking about secure by design, which is, again, very important that as products are built, that they provide security from the get-go, no default passwords or any of that kind of stuff. And then this monitoring and responding to things in the future, again, the Cyber Solidarity Act, all of those things are part of those legal frameworks to be able to do those things. So the regulation journey, when NIS2, thanks very much, when NIS2 was kicked off then, so it was on the 14th of December 2022, and it was kind of put out there by October 17, 2024, each European country needs to have this legislated or transposed into their own laws. To get us to move on that, the Cyber Security Bill was passed there back in 24th of July. The heads of bill, as it gets moved into legislation, was on the 30th of August, and that's still in process. So that's something that our own kind of governmental and political system has to kind of bring into space. So the actual deadline didn't happen, but the implementation regulation was published by the EU on that date. So I suppose the question we're left with now, I don't really like the sound of all that, because that's going to mean loads of work, what we have to do. So the first question that we're getting to us in the NCSE, because we're going to be the competent authority for a lot of these things, or the liaise for other competent authorities as they work in this space, is, am I in scope? So as kind of mentioned earlier, we have a tool available on the NCSE website called Am I in Scope? And you go and basically answer the questions. It works you through a kind of a process flow, and will tell you, yes, you appear to be in scope, or no, you don't appear to be in scope. The reason I say appear is because there are some nuances there that will be ironed out as time goes by. So the questions are around, well, is how big is your organisation? What kind of service or sector does it provide? What's the annual turnover of your company? They're the things that decide whether you come in under the regulation. Now, whether or not you come under the regulation, the principles guiding it can be applied to everybody. So if you think about the things that we have in Ireland, like we did a lot of work as from government to produce the cyber security baseline standard a couple of years back. And if you don't know what that is, that's a good thing to go and research, because basically it's a help that they're not even the top tips, they're kind of the musts and the shoulds of what you should do to at least get started on this journey of being secure. Then you might understand or be very familiar with the unfortunately named NIST, NIS2 framework. Again, there's lots of security frameworks that you can align your business to. Or you might go down the route of, well, I think we'll get certified in this area. So you might pick ISO 27001 as a security standard to be measured against. Now, if all of those things are very familiar to you, that's great, because it means you're kind of 90% of the way there to understanding what NIS2 is going to require from you. So again, the big thing is going to be these essential entities versus important entities. So if you come into that category of that, you're absolutely essential for Ireland Inc. to function. It's kind of a compliment in some ways that, you're considered very important, but the other side of that is going to be, that's where the regulatory authorities are going to start. They're going to start coming to the big players and say, well, are your systems up to these security standards? If you're important, it might be a different approach. It's all really that is being kind of ironed out at the moment. So if you're in scope, what's going to be required? Well, if you look at ISO 27001 and then look at NIST or look at NIS2, the big changes are to do much more emphasis, again, about senior management understanding the risks to their organisation and their data, or not even to the data, to the business. What's going to interrupt the business, and what can we do to keep it going? So that's probably one of the most important parts in it. And again, because it's a regulation and there is this possibility of fines being involved, the person going to get fined is the people at the top of the organisation, because they will have known the risks. The IT team will have brought those risks and have them on the risk register. Maybe said, well, we need the capital to be able to do these things, or whatever it is. And the senior management team have to sign off on that, so they become responsible for it. So there's lots of different areas. Again, as you're all cyber security professionals, you know what all of these things are, whether it's down to relatively simple things like access control, really, really important, because again, hackers don't really hack in anymore. They just steal credentials and use them. So we have to have good arrangements around that. Multi-factor authentication sounds easy to do. But if you're in an organisation like a government department and you've got 10,000 staff, do you give every staff member a department-issued phone to get their MFA? There's kind of a money cost involved in those kind of things as well. But again, it all aligns up to this NIST arrangement of are we defending, detecting, and all those kind of things that are in there. Maybe if I talk about them, what would your authority, your certificate authority be looking for if they come to your organisation under this NIS2 framework and to talk to you about it? Well, one is that do everybody involved understand about risk management? There's going to need to be some training more about that. Personally, I feel the word risk is not really the right word we should use all the time, because risk, we were talking about black swans earlier, they're kind of things that you don't know about. Then, of course, we have vulnerabilities. We all have loads of those in our environments, and we try to mitigate against them. And then we have threats that can come from outside our organisation, or even inside the organisation. It can be an issue. We've got to train our employees that this is not all foreign to them. We've got to conduct audits and produce evidence of compliance. So it's not about what you say, but it's evidence of what you're doing. That's really what the regulation is going to be looking for. The other thing that is a little bit different is this idea of it's already been in place for those under the NIS1 directive, where if they have a significant incident, they report it to us in the NCSE. So that's going to broaden in scope. We're going to go from maybe 70 organisations within Ireland to 4,000 possibly, who'll all be reporting incidents as they occur to us. So we're going to be that single point of contact for Europe. And we're absolutely delighted about that, because we have all this capacity to deal with all these incidents. So it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be something we've got to take on board. Perhaps some of these AI tools will be employed to help us do that. It's all kind of being explored. And then another remit for the NCSE is to ensure that there are, in the specific kind of sectors, that there are arrangements to help each other, that there are confidential, secure meetings and platforms where organisations can share threat intelligence or experiences that they're having in a confidential way to be able to keep ahead of these problems. So the national competent authorities, they're kind of been developed over different sectors. So we're going to have one looking after the kind of health sector. There's one looking after energy sector. There's one looking after digital sector. So that's kind of a tough one. That's the big digital companies, telecom providers, those kind of things. And all of those will be chaired, if you like, or guided in some way by the NCSE. So our lofty goal is to try and produce consistency. We don't want one sector to be overly harsh or too lenient as they deal with the various constituents that they have. So there's a lot of discussion and development in those areas. And then to standardise things around audit. We don't want to reduce it to a checkbox exercise, because that's kind of can lead you astray sometimes, but it is very useful to kind of know, yeah, these are the big ticket items I should be looking at as I go along. Supervision. You're going to talk about time-to-time visits and audits. There might be self-audits that can be completed, those kind of things as well. And then, again, looking at, do you have policies and documentation to support the security controls that you have in there? And then we have this area of, well, will you get fined if you don't comply? So there's a couple of different ways of looking at getting fined. I don't know if you've ever had the joy of being caught by a speed camera driving. And basically, it's pass-fail. If you're doing 67 in a 60 zone, you're getting a ticket. That's the end of it. There's no negotiating, unless you have a really good excuse. Or there's the other kind of nudge theory ones, you know, the way the smiley face comes up, thank you for being under the speed limit, or you're going a little bit over the speed limit. So we feel that that nudge theory is the best way to get this started, to actually work in tandem with organisations to help them be aware of what's required and to slowly bring those things up to the surface as we go along. So when things go wrong, what do we do? So this is a kind of a bit of a change. And the idea, again, is where the NCSE have to work really hard in this space is to ensure that you trust us. Because you're going to send sensitive information about your own environments. And there's always a concern about that, isn't there? You know, your lawyers will tell you your cybersecurity policy might your insurance policy might have some guidelines around that. So we're going to really work on that, being that trusted resource. And so that any notification that's sent to us, we can anonymize it. We can pick out the salient point that might help another organization. So the early warning system is basically within 24 hours, I tripped up on the train and I hurt my leg. That's all we need to know. Then you've got up to 72 hours to give us a bit more detail. I went to the doctor and, he said, I dodged a bullet. I've only hurt this instead of it could have been really serious. Wonderful. And then we, in turn, our CSERT and our threat intelligence people will be able to liaise with you and say, thank you very much. This is a suggestion, might give you some information that might help you, or put you in contact with somebody who can give you advice. And then we're looking at sort of building a final report after a month. Or if the incident lasts longer than that, well, maybe an additional report. And then in turn, we have to take that and turn it into a much larger report to share with Europe about this is what the threat environment and what's been experienced in Ireland. Again, there's a little bit of help we're working on at the moment, which is around, well, what class is a significant incident or not? How long do our systems have to be down? How long is it happening for? We'll have some information about that we're happy to share. We'll be doing that very shortly. And a lot of it is, again, if something has a cross-border impact, that's very important as well. As we said, Europe has a kind of what's called a cyclone network, which is looking at this. If we have a big event that's going to impact all of Ireland, that Europe knows about that as well. And then we talk about incidents and the level of severity and those kind of things. So they're all kind of things that are available there. So what information would we be looking for? Well, as I said there, an initial warning report, a notification, a final report just about what's going on. And the idea is not that there's an incident going on in your organisation, you have to drop everything to write this report for the NCSE. No. It's the other way around. We want you to do your job and look after the incident, but it's just that early notification to us so we can be of an assistance if you need it. So what's next? What can we expect? Well, I said there's that tool there that will be helpful. We're going to be submitting a portal. We ran into a little issue ourselves because the law is not it's not legislation yet. We were all set to start registering organisations, but you know yourself the way GDPR works, that if you're don't have a legal reason to gather the information, you shouldn't be doing it. So even we're caught up in that at the moment. So news on that will be out. But it's very briefly, organisations who are in scope need to register. We need to know what sector you're in, obviously contact details, and down to something like your IP address range. Because the NCSE have been given some powers around all of the IP addresses in Ireland, that if a kind of a critical emergency happens to the nation, that we can do some work in that space. And then, as I said, the evidence of compliance, we kind of talked through that. We're just about to publish this document, which are risk management measures. So basically that's looking at the legislation, aligning it up with, well, these are the things you need to do, and kind of spelling it out. So we'll have that available very shortly on our website. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention in this idea of information sharing, one of the guidelines for us is that the member states of the EU should form these groups to share information with one another. So it's this idea, we might be in our organisation competitors with another organisation in the business sense, but in the room of cybersecurity, we're actually partners and we're working along together to share information. So what we've done in the NCSE is set up these cyber cores, we've called them. We've got one for energy, for transport, for government, for health, local government, as I said, DigiCore, so on. And these groups meet every few months to kind of talk about sort of what the threat landscape is. We have people from our operations team come in and have a discussion, tell you what's going on in the bigger picture of things, and then maybe even help with tabletop exercises and all that sort of stuff that might help you in your maturity of your security systems. And then finally, the CCERT, which is based, the national CCERT is based in the NCSE. And this is how we can respond and help you. We can give you some advice and maybe, as I said, put you in touch with the correct people. So I've gone through it quite quickly. I have a few minutes left, I think. But is there any kind of questions anybody might have on that? Or do you get the gist of where the legislation is bringing us? Somebody there like to ask a question?
Hi. It's kind of a comment rather than a question.
Sure.
So you are being quite apologetic about this new regulation coming in, etc. But I think we saw in the first talk today how all the collection of data on incidents is going to help the whole community with intelligence, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I hope it didn't come across apologetic. I suppose it's the idea that the general feedback from people is, when any new regulation comes in, it's like, how am I going to deal with this? You know, it's like, you might think or remember when the NCT for cars came in, and you think, oh no, my poor car is going to be interrogated all the time. But now that we're used to it, it actually produces safer vehicles. You know, that's the whole gist of it. So the idea of this regulation is that you could have companies who say, well, I'm going to invest a lot of money in security. And another company says, well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer that risk to my cyber insurance. Whereas that's not really going to be able to be done anymore, because everybody who's under the scope of this has to put similar investment in place to cover these kind of things. So as I said, I feel it's a very positive thing. It's kind of a compliment to be told you're an important entity. It gives kind of kudos to your organisation. One of the things we're looking for is to make Ireland Incorporated a place to work. This is a country where you can invest, where we look after our infrastructure, we look after our data, it's secure. All those things are going to help us grow, and particularly in the small business sector, it's going to help in that way as well. Okay, great stuff. Thanks, Gordon. So thanks very much.